The 60s were a fun and memorable time to be a kid. Youth culture dominated it. Young people were constantly inventing new ways to dress, date, get around, and speak. Some slang terms of this era made a significant impact on the way we all talk today, while others fizzled out by the end of the decade. Facts Verse presents slang words that every 60s kid will remember instantly. Far out. Whenever something was so cool that you could hardly believe it, it was far out. The term refers to the phrases out of this world and mind-blowing. Bummer. Whenever you're disappointed or sad, it's a major bummer. The term was used to describe such somber emotions, especially when something didn't work out as expected. This is a great example of a 60s slang phrase that many of us still use. Call it an oldie but goodie. Hang loose. There are countless ways to use this phrase, but the most common one is when telling a person they need to chill out, calm down, or stay put. It can also be used to describe letting go of your inhibitions and allowing yourself to have a good time. To use it in a sentence, you could say something like, "Just hang loose, man. Everything will work out in the end." Give me some skin. Alternately, slap me some skin. This is a phrase you'd use when asking someone for a handshake. The phrase refers to two people's skin touching when giving a handshake. I got to split. Just realize you left the oven on back at home? Did the vibe at the party suddenly change and you feel the pressing need to relocate? Well, then just say you got a split. The slang phrase means you need to leave. Of course, if you're a square, you could just say that you're leaving, but this is far cooler. To spice the phrase up a bit, you could go, I got a split like a banana. Lay it on me. Whenever someone wants to vent their frustrations, instead of saying, tell me about it, you can say something like, lay it on me. The phrase means that you're telling someone it's okay for them to say whatever it is that's weighing heavy on their mind, as in, what's wrong, dude? Lay it on me. Cop a breeze or agitate the gravel. Another couple of ways to say you gotta get the let out is by saying you need to cop a breeze. In other words, you need to make like a tree and leave. As far as agitating the gravel, that just means you've got to skedaddle with haste, likely kicking up some pavement in the process. Apple butter. Come election time, politicians are frequently guilty of doing a lot of smooth talking. Another creative way of saying this is to describe it as apple butter. The phrase isn't used as much these days, but that's really a shame, as apple butter is one of the most delicious items in the spreadable food world. Backseat bingo. In the 50s, there was an explosion of car culture in America, and with that came a tidal wave of new slang terms that would linger around for the next couple of decades. Backseat bingo refers to the act of getting hot and heavy with your special someone in the backseat of your ride. Parking was another term that was used to describe the same activity. Beatnik. This word is often used to describe the most prominent subculture of the 1950s, but it was actually coined towards the end of the decade in 1958 and continued to be used throughout the 60s. The phrase's origins are traced back to columnist Herb Caen, who added the suffix "nik" to the end of words, taking inspiration from the Sputnik satellite launched in 1957. Beat is a word that describes members of the Beat generation, and Beatnik is just a cooler way of articulating that. Your typical beatnik was a free-thinking, slam poetry reciting artist type who rejected the status quo and societal conventions. American novelist Jack Kerouac is the supreme example of the beatnik of old. Eventually, this subculture merged with the hippie subculture that arose out of the anti-Vietnam War protest movement. Cool. Perhaps the most used slang term of all time, cool was originally part of African American vernacular. It arose out of the jazz scene of the 1940s, and by the 1960s, it had become mainstream with the youth across America. Anything hip and trendy was labeled as cool, be it a fashionable article of clothing or a catchy song. Cruisin For A Brusin. If your pal is looking to pick a fight with someone, you could say they are cruising for a bruisin'. By the late 60s and early 70s, however, it came to be used as a pejorative way of saying someone had a short temper. Pad. While the word pad can describe any place of residence these days, it originally had unsavory connotations when first used in the mid-20th century. The beatniks of the 1950s used the term to describe a place to crash or a room used to detox from a night of drug use. Ginchy. If someone told you you were the Ginchyest, that meant they were giving you high praise. While the term essentially meant excellent, it didn't manage to stick around very long, especially after cool became the dominant word to describe essentially the same thing. Dreamboat. This term can be used to describe any person, primarily men, who were worth going gaga over. If a star like Elvis or James Dean was hot enough, they qualified to be called dreamboats. Groovy. Sure, this might be the most obvious word included in this video, but no list of 60s slang words would be complete without it. Groovy was the awesome, bangin' or dope of the decade. It was a versatile word that has since been immortalized in contemporary pop culture thanks to the enduring appeal of the hippies. The word originated in the jazz culture of the 20s. Originally, it related to the groove of a piece of music. It can also refer to the physical groove cut in a vinyl record. Another way it's used is to refer to getting your groove back or realigning with your mojo. Passion pit. This phrase has come to be synonymous with a certain indie pop band, but back in the day, when people used to play a lot of Backseat Bingo, it referred to drive-in theaters. Chrome-plated. If someone got all chrome-plated, it meant they got dressed up more than usual. Once again, this phrase came from American car culture and the chrome finishings often found on souped-up hot rods. The living end. This phrase can mean anything that's particularly outlandish, outrageous, absurd, or scandalous. Today, instead of telling someone that they're the living end, you might say they're being extra. Burn rubber. This phrase means to gain speed behind the wheel of a car at such an alarming rate you literally leave behind a trail of hot, melted rubber. It can also mean you got out of a jam with lightning-fast speed. Get pinned. This phrase was synonymous with going steady. Its origins are related to the tradition of male suitors offering their prospective love interests literal pins to wear as a sign of their commitment. It was mostly used in the 50s, but stuck around for a while and was still in use by the mid-60s. Off the cob. This phrase is used to describe something particularly corny or hokey. It's pretty self-explanatory, but it's got a nice ring to it. Dig it. If you can dig it, you understand or agree with something. It's thought that this term is derived from the physical action of getting beneath the surface of something. Another way of saying the same thing is by asking someone if they can read you. Much like far out and cool, this term came from African American vernacular and was popularized in the jazz scene of the 40s and 50s. By the 60s, it had two main connotations. Besides asking someone if they comprehended or agreed with something you said, you could also use it as an expression of enthusiasm, essentially alerting the other party that you were on board or down with whatever it is they were talking about. It's a gas. If something is a gas, that means it's a good time. The phrase was originally used by Irish English speakers to describe any enjoyable situation or agreeable person. A common false origin story attributes it to the effects of laughing gas or nitrous oxide. The phrase was immortalized in the Rolling Stones song Jumpin' Jack Flash. Mellow. Last but not least, we have a term that refers to being relaxed or laid back. Historically, this word was used in phrases like mellow like a cello and indicates someone or something who's very easygoing and chill. If you tell someone they need to mellow out, you're saying they need to loosen up and relax. Mellow has also been occasionally used to describe the intoxicating effects of a particular smokable herb. Nowadays, we'd call that being stoned. Now it's time to hear from you. How many of these 60s slang terms do you remember? Let us know in the comments section below.